was young, my earliest exposure to indigenous cultures did not come from textbooks. It came from elementary school, if you can believe it. The Thanksgiving celebrations we held there. We would reenact crossing the Mayflower, crafting hand turkeys, and celebrated a romanticized, peaceful exchange between colonists and Native Americans. Reflecting on this now, I can see how sanitized this version of history was, erasing things like the truths of colonization, land theft, and the resilience of indigenous communities. Later, my understanding was further shaped by Hollywood. Movies like Disney's Pocahontas,
Wingapo.
Wingapo.
And how we say goodbye. Ana.
I like hello better. It's called a helmet.
or Night at the Museum, where indigenous figures like Sacagawea appeared as beautiful, quiet exhibits or relics of the distant past. Back then, films were a trustworthy source, and if it appeared on the screen, it seemed undeniably real. You saw it with your own eyes. So, now do I understand the bias, especially beginning with early media that constructed a frozen image of indigenous life based more on fantasy and external myths than truths. In this video, we'll explore how these false narratives were created, exploited, and now actively reclaimed. It's about the power dynamics behind storytelling, on who gets to hold the camera, who writes the scripts, and who's shaping the image, and why returning these narratives to indigenous voices matters so deeply. Beginning with the origins of film, we start with the silent film era. And in this film, titled Indian Brothers, 1911, it is a perpetrated narrative where indigenous characters are often portrayed in a dramatic stereotype, and this fuels that misunderstanding and myths of, and this specific one is more of a fighting warrior trope that we learned about in class, but essentially just very derogatory in neglecting all the other information that they hold and have in their culture, and then also depicting them in red face is also horrific. Similarly, we move on with documentarian style filming, which again still has a eerie tone to it in the way you're observing them in their culture, but it doesn't feel organic. So this film is A Day with the Seminoles from the 1920s, 1930s, and it provided a voyeuristic view into the lives of the Seminole tribe in the Florida Everglades. Despite it showing genuine aspects of Seminole daily life, like traditional clothing and green corn farming, its perspective was undeniably filtered through a colonial lens, ultimately reinforcing exoticized and simplified representation of native cultures. We move to 1971, a little later on in the years. One powerful example of these stereotypes in the mainstream media is Crying Indian.
People don't. People start pollution. People can stop it.
It's an anti-littering commercial featuring a native man paddling through pristine waters, stepping onto littered land, shedding a single tear, and the ad declares, "People start pollution. People can stop it." This ad was initially acclaimed as a moving public service announcement, one of Advertising Age's top 100 campaigns. And the truth behind this image was deeply problematic. The actor, Iron Eyes Cody, wasn't native. He was an Italian-American named Espera Oscar de Corti, who built his career portraying indigenous characters. Moreover, investigative journalism revealed that behind the commercial were some of America's biggest corporate polluters. And they wanted to push Keep America Beautiful campaign, and their true motive wasn't environmental care like the slogan insists, but rather shifting the blame for pollution from corporate responsibility to the individual consumers watching the commercial. So take that as you will. Kind of crazy that the crying ad wasn't even just a stereotype, it was corporate propaganda. One of my other artworks from class, Monk's Mound, a monumental earthwork which was from the Mississippian civilization at Cahokia, which exemplifies erasure. This myth of mound builders falsely attributed indigenous architecture achievements to other cultures. And it parallels with early cinema distorting indigenous history and erasing their cultural contributions because, a lot of people didn't believe that they could do this or make that. So, they reduced them to a stereotype and thinking of them in a certain way. And I think that definitely relays over to film and how we continued to see them past, the stories. Artist James Luna's provocative performance, The Artifact piece in 1987, directly confronted the dehumanization and museumification of indigenous cultures. By laying his living body in a museum exhibit case, Luna challenged the objectification inherent in the portrayal of Native Americans in museums and media. His act highlighted the ongoing misrepresentation and voyeuristic gaze historically prevalent in media portrayals and pushing back against cultural erasure and jump-scaring people. First haunted house, maybe? Artist Wendy Redstar humorously critiques historical stereotypes through her photographic series, 4 Seasons, 2006. By posing with a traditional Crow attire within artificial kitschy diorama landscapes, she subverts romanticized portrayals commonly found in historical photographs and films. Her work reveals the artificiality and the absurdity behind stereotyped Native imagery, reclaiming agency over her representation and narrative. Johnny Bulin's work, Magpie Geese and Water Lilies at the Waterhole, vividly illustrates the issue of cultural theft. In the 1980s, his sacred artwork was commercially reproduced without permission, prompting legal battles that underscored the significance of artistic ownership. And this directly mirrors the appropriation of indigenous narratives and imagery in early 20th century films, highlighting the broader implications of such theft. This contemporary series, Reservation Dogs, created by Sterling Harjo and Taika Waititi, represents a powerful reclamation of indigenous storytelling. With indigenous creators, actors, and authentic voices, it disrupts traditional stereotypes and presents indigenous communities as dynamic, contemporary, and deeply human. This series demonstrates the transformative power of indigenous storytelling, turning historical misrepresentation into authentic self-expression and representation. It is just genuinely super funny, pretty crass, and I think it offers insight to a part of life that I've